Some workers, employers, and advocates are backing legislation at the State House to crack down on wage theft. To explain why the measure is needed and why it could help are two of the advocates: the Director of Capacity Building at Community Labor United, Isabel Gonzalez-Webster, and the Executive Director of the Brazilian Workers Center, Natalicia, Tracy. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
I want to start with Isabel. Talk about the kinds of workers you see this as helping.
So this actually helps, I would say it helps a wide array of workers, and I would also say it helps good employers as well. It affects workers in the contract industry. It affects folks that clean at your local supermarkets. It affects folks in the food industry. It affects workers that get paid minimum wage, above minimum wage, below minimum wage. Wage theft is not getting paid your wages, not getting paid vacation pay, being misclassified as an independent contractor, not getting vacation, not getting paid overtime, sometimes getting written a bad check by your employer. I mean, it's a broad definition. Natalicia, I don't know if you
Natalicia, what do you hear from people you help at the Worker Center about what's going on out there right now?
Well, basically, they work and they don't get paid. Sometimes they get paid half of they're supposed to get paid. Like the employer may say, well, I'm going to pay you half this month or this week, and then I'll give you later. And then you accumulate a lot of money. The employer owes them money after month accumulated. And then after 6-7 months, they say, well, I'm not going to pay you, and you can't make me. Like very bold and explicit wage theft happen in a community. And then we also see cases that they just don't pay overtime. They just getting straight time for working 50, 60, 70, even 80 hours per week in different jobs, especially in construction, residential construction.
What if you're an immigrant, you're mending clothes, and somebody says, take the stuff home and work on it, and I'll pay you a certain amount? But not talking about how much per hour?
Well, that's common too. You know, people, and that actually we see with domestic workers where they said, okay, we need you to clean 5 houses today and we pay you X amount of money, let's say $80 for cleaning 5 houses, but then you end up spending 10 hours cleaning them and we're still getting under minimum wage to pay them, and they don't feel obligated to pay the difference.
Yeah. Coming back to Isabel, as far as this legislation, I mean, there has been enforcement against wage theft before. So what does this legislation do that's not being done already?
So this legislation gives more tools to the Attorney General, and quite frankly, the amount of wage theft is so great that currently there isn't the resources, and also the resources and tools that the Attorney General has isn't quite sufficient to be able to address the wage theft that currently exists. Additionally, right now, some of the problems that exist is when a worker comes forward and has the strength to address an issue of wage theft. They say, okay, this employer didn't pay me my wages. They say my employer is X person. They might believe the person on their shirt is their employer, but actually that person is not the person cutting their paycheck, is a subcontractor or a subcontractor of a subcontractor, you know. And right now, it's really hard to hold that subcontractor accountable to pay the wages. Our legislation holds multiple people in that tier of subcontracting accountable for wage theft. It shouldn't be the worker's responsibility to go up the chain to be able to find out who's responsible to pay their wages when they did the work, and everyone up the ladder is benefiting from the work that they did. And that's an example of something that our legislation provides that doesn't currently exist in the system.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Isabel Gonzalez-Webster from Community Labor United and Natalicia Tracy from the Brazilian Workers Center. Natalicia, if you're a legal immigrant, you might be afraid of reporting someone because you might might lose your job, and if you don't have legal status, you might be afraid of being deported. So how do you get people to overcome fear and take advantage of protections?
Well, the way we do is we educate members of our community on labor laws. We make it clear to them that immigration status and being undocumented is separated from work laws, from labor laws, and it's the country cannot mix the two of them. That's the only way you can protect our workers. So we educate them on their rights, and we also educate employees that sometimes are not aware of that, to let them know that there's strong anti-retaliation laws in place, that you cannot use immigration status as a way to sort of force a worker not to get paid or to retaliate against a worker.
Right. Isabel, I imagine because CLU is backing this here, this is not just about the workers who are being exploited and victimized, but I guess it's also for the companies that compete against their employers.
Yeah, Chris, I'm glad you brought that up. For us, it's just about fairness, right? And CLU is an organization that brings labor and community together and is attempting to work with businesses as well, because it isn't just about what's fair for workers, but it's what's fair for labor, what's fair for workers, what's fair for the economy, and what's fair for the good businesses that are out there. And if you talk to the good businesses, they say that they're being undercut by these bad actors, right? They put in a bid for a project or put in a bid for cleaning a big retail company, and they lose out to some of these other companies that have bad practices, that are underbidding, that they're not paying adequately wages, or they're underbidding because they know they have bad practices, and they continue to get bids. They have, they might have prior violations for wage theft or other issues in the workplace, and they constantly get, they constantly win bids over, companies that have good practices. They might be, union companies, union shops. They might be shops that have, policies in place to pay, above minimum wage or have certain benefits for their companies. It's not fair to not support those companies that are supporting working families that get paid adequately and fairly, that then those wages go into our economy and support our overall economy. So this legislation not only supports workers, supports our community, but also supports good companies that are doing the right thing. And so the point is to get the companies that are bad actors out and support the good companies that are doing good things.
Natalicia, your organization was among the leaders in passing new protections for domestic workers. Does this legislation do something for those workers too?
Absolutely, because when we think about businesses in general, we have to think about the cleaning industry and the elderly care industry. There are lots of companies out there too that they do the same thing. It's unfortunately wage theft is prevalent, and it impacts all industries, and we absolutely see issues of wage theft with caregivers, nannies, and also domestic house cleaners as well.
Isabel, talk about the hearing recently at SASE, because you have a sponsor for this bill from Boston here too, Representative Michael Witzer.
Yes.
And what about the turnout, the cross-section of people supporting this?
Yeah, so there was a hearing at the Joint Committee of Workforce and Labor and Workforce Development, and we had an amazing turnout of workers, labor folks, businesses. It was a packed room, and actually people were coming in and out because it was incredibly packed, and we needed to make sure the aisles were clear. And we had folks speak from a labor perspective, from a business perspective, from community's perspective, and we had strong testimonies from workers talking about how this impacted their families, and workers from different work places. So we had someone from a cleaning industry, someone from a contracting experience, et cetera. And they were able to talk about how this is widespread, right? They talked from New Bedford to Boston to Worcester, all over the Commonwealth. And they were able to talk about how this is important legislation, one, to protect workers, to promote the economy. I mean, folks testified about how there was an estimated $700 million that was lost and stolen in wage theft in last year alone. They talked about the impact on families. We had legislators talk in support. We have 136 legislators that are signed on to our bill, so it's a bipartisan support on our legislation. We have a lot of momentum gearing up to our hearing on June 20th and up to this date. And so we really feel strongly that not only is this an issue that impacts families and that people really want to see change on, but that we have legislators and community really backing this.
Finally, Natalicia, we should mention that if any workers have any problems, they want a little help, is there a way they can get in touch with the Brazilian Workers Center?
Absolutely. We have workshop on workers' rights twice a week, and they can find us online, www.braziliancenter.org, or they can stop by. We're right not too far from here on Harvard Avenue.
And Isabel, as far as people who want to find anything more about Community Labor United?
So Community Labor United is massclu.org, but more importantly, our coalition that is moving this legislation along is Community Worker Center and Labor Together, and that website is stopmasswagetheft.org.
Thank you very much for being with us, Isabel Gonzalez-Webster and Natalicia Tracy.
Thank you.
In a moment, promoting healthy relationships and protecting teenagers from the perils of social media.